Hey everyone, I wanted to create a quick getting started video using LadrillosJS and at the same time create like a tutorial video on how to create like code blocks that you can use on your website for displaying like in your documentation, like for example, uh, something like this. So we'll be using this library called highlight.js and similar in Vue's documentation site. So this is kind of what we want to go for. So what is Ladrillos? So Ladrillos is a lightweight framework for building web apps and basically takes your HTML files and creates web components out of them. So let's go ahead and get started. To get started, we need a component. So let's create one. So we'll create a new file called code block.html. And just to see if this is working, let's go ahead and add some lorem ipsum. Okay, so back into our index file. So of course we can npm install the package, but I wanted to show its simplicity and just use a CDN. So here in the top in our head section, we added the link to the CDN. And now in here, we'll add another script tag. And it needs to be a type module. And then now we have a reference through Ladrillos. And then we want to register the component. So this method takes 3 arguments. The last one's optional, but for this tutorial, we'll focus on the 2. So the first one is the name of the component. So it's identifier, so we have to follow web component naming convention. So we'll call this code.block, and then the path. This can live anywhere. Since it's on the top level of our project, we'll just say code block.html. Now, if we want to use it, we now add the code block. And now as we can see this here. And if we inspect, we can see the HTML component inside of our project. Great. So next thing we want to do is use the package highlight.js. So let's look at the documentation. It needs a few things. So we'll copy that, go in here, and we know this is working. Save that. And now if we go look, if we look here in our shadow root, we have styles. So it imported the styles. And in the head, we have the reference to the highlight.js. So this is now working. And then last, we need the script. And then we need the code block here. All right. So cool, we have that. Now, this isn't going to work out of the box since this crawls the document, and since we're using the shadow root of a web component, it doesn't know how to get to this. So to fix that, we need to get a reference of the code element. And we can do that doing this dot query selector. And we're going to select the code tag inside of the pre-tag. And instead of highlight all, we're going to say highlight element. And we'll pass in our code element. Great. I see now it's working. It's a little hard to see, so let's change the style. We'll use the Atom 1 dark. And there we go. Great. So now we have our component working, and if we inspect that inside the shadow root, so you can see our code here and our styles are still there. Great. But what would be nice if we can do is if I write some HTML here, for example, I want it to display inside of here. Now, to do that, we need to use the slots. And we can't just simply add it in here, unfortunately, because the HLJS kind of overrides it. So what we can do for to overcome this is we can just add the slot down here. So you can see now it's coming in. And now what we can do is the code element, we can set the text content of our code element. So let's actually get rid of the 3 dots real quick. Now we can set the text content of that to equal the value of the slot. So in this case we use this as in the components inner HTML. And there we go. So now we're displaying that here. So we don't have to worry about changing the less than and greater than. So it's a little bit easier to work with. So let's just test it out. So if we do like h1 hello world, perfect, that's working great. But we have this slot, we don't want that. So what we can do is let's just create another reference to slot. So we'll say this dot query selector, and we'll select that slot element. And right when we highlight it, let's just we'll say slot dot remove. Cool. So now we don't see that. Great, we're almost there. Now, what we would like is, I would like to have, kind of like you see here, you can kind of see like template or JS. I would like to actually pass in like what the file would be called. So we can pass in an attribute. We'll call this file name. And well, this will equal, let's say, index.html. All right, not to view that. So when you create an attribute, it adds it to, we can have access to it via like curly braces. And there we go. So now it'll show up. Great. And now we also, I kind of like this functionality of copy, so I would like to do something similar. So let's also add a button. And we'll say copy. And then now we have a copy button. It doesn't do anything right now. So let's add an event or a method here to do that. So let's say const copy code, and we'll create just an arrow function. And just to see this working, we'll say let's actually alert. We'll say alert, and we'll alert this dot inner HTML. Okay, nothing's happening because we have not added the on click. So in our button, we'll say on click. And as you can see, this is just JavaScript and HTML, so there's nothing, the framework's adding some syntactic sugar, but not much. So it's very familiar to just web standards. So now if I click copy, we get an alert, and it's undefined. That's because I spelled this incorrectly. Inner HTML. All right, there we go. Perfect. All right, so now to copy the code, we can use the Navigator clipboard, but that's not supported all the time. We can also create a temporary text area, set the value, and copy that. But just for this demo, I'm going to use the Navigator clipboard. So let's say Navigator dot clipboard, and we want to write the text, and the text is this dot inner HTML. So now if I hit copy, there we go. So now we're copying the contents. Perfect. Now let's make this look a little bit nicer. So for that, I have some styles I already created. So I will add that, and we can just simply add a style tag here. And then let's wrap this in some classes to make this look a little bit nicer. And there we go. So I just have a div with a class of code container, and then for the header, we have a class of code header, and that has our file name and the button, and then just our code tag here. So looks, just make it look just a little bit nicer. So we hit copy. This is still working. Great. All right. Now, what I would like to happen is we don't really know that it was copied. So maybe we can create another component to alert us, like a banner or something. So let's do that. So let's go back to our Unix file here and let's create another. And we can call this, let's just call it alert.html. And let's just make sure this is working. And go back here. So just like we did earlier, we just have to register that component. So we'll give it a name, call this alert component, and then we'll point it to alert.html. And then we'll add this to the top of our, and there we go. Oh, and just to show here, so getting started. Oh, so we can use HTML along with our components here, just so you can see that. Great. Let's inspect our elements. So we have our component in here, and then we have our other component there. Perfect. All right. So let's start making this look a little bit nicer. We'll say we'll just create a div, and we'll give that a class of let's say alert-banner. And inside of that, we'll create a variable that we can use here called message. So what the message we want to display, and we'll also have a button so we can dismiss that banner. And we'll use, so we can have the X, we'll use the times. There we go. And let's also give this a class. And we'll say it's the close-btn button. And we'll also give it an ARIA label. And it'll just be close. Great. Cool. Nothing's happening, of course, right now. And the message is not being displayed. All right. So how can I get my components to talk to each other? So LadrillosJS has a method to emit, and we can also have a method to listen. So what we can do is we can emit from our component and then listen in our alert component. So let's do that. So when we copy, let's now call the emit method, and we give it, what is it we want to listen? This is just the name, the identifier, and we'll just say copied. And you can pass in data or you can just emit it. For our case, we will want to pass some data, and we'll pass in an object, say message, with the string, and we can say something like, we'll say what code, code copied to clipboard. Great. So now that we have that, let's go listen on our alert. So we'll need a script tag, and then we'll say this dot listen. And what are we listening for? We're listening for copied. And then we can run a function. And we'll console.log the data that comes out of it. We can probably just do this too. We just want the message. So let's log the message. Let's go to our console. So if I hit copy, there we go. Copy to clipboard. So there's our message. So now how do we set that message so it can be shown here? So what we can do is, since the message is in state, we have a method called this dot set state. Inside of set state, you can pass in an object, and we're going to update the message binding to, well, you can just do that. So message, it'll bind to a message here. So now if I hit copy, our message gets updated. Perfect. Now, what we want to do is just make this look a little bit nicer. So for time's sake, I'm going to copy some styles I already have. Great. And by default, I did display none, but let's take that off. So now we have this banner here. So when I hit copied, a nice banner that says that. So, but I don't want the banner to show. That's why I had the display none. All right. But so now what I want to do is I want to, when I copy it and then emits and I listen, I want to show the banner and display the message. So let's get a reference to the banner. So we'll say this dot query selector, and we want to get the class of alert banner. And then when I copy, I want to, let's see, what can we do? We'll set the display property. So once we set the state, let's say banner.style.display, and we'll set it to flex. So now if I hit copy, it appears. Great. But we want to also be able to dismiss this. So let's also create a reference to the close. We could do it a little different than we did in the code block. We'll just, so it can show you, we can also add event listeners to our elements. So we say close btn equals, and inside our banner, we can just query select our close button. So we'll say the class close dash btn. Great. And then that, we'll add an event listener to that. So we'll say close btn, add event listener. And the event listener would just be click. And we'll run the following function. Let's just say console.log button clicked. Let's see if this works. So we'll hit copy, we'll hit the button, and we get button click. Perfect. All right. So let's add. Let's see what we can do. We can just do banner.style.display, and we'll just have it equal to none. So now we hit copy, close that, it gets rid of it. Perfect. What if we don't, I don't know, like what if we don't hit the close? Maybe we want to add like a self-dismissing. So one thing we can do is let's create another function. We'll call it start dismissing. Yeah, start dismissing. And this function here, what it will do, it'll be a set timeout. And it will run a function that will just do the same thing, the banner.style.display equals none. And it will, let's set it up so we can pass it in like seconds. So let's say, what do we call it? We'll call it timeout. Timeout, and this will equal, let's say, 5 seconds. So now we can do here, when we set the duration, we'll call state of this dot state.timeout. So we're getting a reference to the attribute, and since it's seconds, we'll just times it by 1000, so we get 5 seconds. Great. So we click on copied, and then it'll run the listener, it'll display it, and then we can start the timeout. So if we don't click on it, it'll start this. So now if we hit copy, and in about 5 seconds, it should just go away by itself if we don't hit the close button. Great. Perfect. Great. Awesome. So that's basically it. We, like I said, since this is a component, we can just copy this and create another one. We'll call this, maybe this is the JS version, and const, let's see, const name equals, oh, well, first we need to add the tag, so script. We'll say const name equals hello world. There we go. We can copy that. Copies the clipboard. If we go here, it copies that right there. Great. And we can create a whole bunch of these if we wanted to. So save that. We're getting some red squigglies because it thinks it's actual script, but you can see here. Now we have our component. If we inspect that, oh, where is the thing? Yeah, if we inspect it, you can see all our code elements here. Great. Hope you enjoy.